A another heartbreaking loss coming up here. Lot to go over. Lot to go over. A lot on the offensive side of the ball that I saw. A lot on the defensive side of the ball that I saw that I liked. A lot on the defensive side of the ball that is getting taken advantage of. Certain holes in certain coverages that are still being exploited. Nebraska giving up a ton of hole shots there early on in the game. Just methodically, anytime Nebraska was in a situation of cover two, it seemed like they were able to dissect the defense. Whenever Nebraska was in a cover three, they were able to find the holes there. It's kind of some of the same little tendencies. UCLA, it reminded me a lot of what Indiana did, where they targeted the sidelines a little bit more. UCLA does like to go to the running backs a lot, but they did push the ball downfield a lot more today. So, and as we come in, I'm going to dive into y'all's comments. But yeah, like I said, we got a lot to talk about. Yeah, Raiola's injury, of course, there really put what felt like almost a nail in the coffin. Harburg did the best he could driving down the field. That's such a tough situation to come into the game right there, and have to be able to get into a rhythm with the offense. But yeah, like I said, we're going to dive into a lot of the offensive issues and stuff like that, and some of the stuff that I saw on the defensive side of the ball. Good job from the run defense. The run defense was there. The fronts that we're doing, they're doing a lot of good in terms of mixing up their defensive fronts. In terms of, last week against Ohio State, we ran a lot of bear fronts, which really kind of compacts that middle and tries to keep that middle from being able to open up. And so occasionally mixing those up, he'll occasionally run some evens and some underneath. So like, it's one of those things where it's the defensive line and the defensive rotation, the pressure's getting home, the run defense is there, but there's still just coverage lapses in the secondary. And the fact that Garbers was able to make some really good throws, some better throws than I've seen him make majority of the season, just falls right on script with a Nebraska game against UCLA. So let's go ahead and let me get into some of y'all's comments here. First things first, if you are dropping in here, please drop a like on the stream. Like I said, it really helps me out. Get your thoughts in here, and I'm going to run through y'all's comments as we go through the show. Unacceptable loss. Agreed. It was one of those things where it's UCLA is a team that you had to beat to feel good about bowl eligibility, and right now it's not feeling good at all. Try to recover late, but like I said, just you can't get out there and come out with 4 completions in the first 3. We had 4 completions by the time UCLA had 4 touchdowns, right? And so it's really hard in that situation. And then Raiola kind of gets it rolling late and then gets injured. So any possibility that Nebraska had to get some momentum rolling, it seemed like every single time it would stop. Right there on the red zone where we run the ball pretty effectively up until the 5-yard line, and all of a sudden we get to the 5-yard line and we start just trying to throw, and the pressure's getting there. I mean, Raiola, more often than not this season, right? And I know we've talked about the play calling from Satterfield being the issue, and I know that's the issue today as well, right? But another thing that I saw early on in this game was just it was execution from all position groups. There are a lot of instances where I feel like our position groups are executing to an extent, but they're not being put in a good situation to succeed because of the play calling. Today, early on in this game, it all seemed out of whack. Everything. The execution was bad. And what I noticed from Raiola in this game early was he's thinking too much, right? And when you're thinking and you're not reacting, quarterback is a very instinctual position, right? Because you don't have really time to think. Post snap, you don't have time to sit there and think to yourself, okay, we got rolling cover 3, right? We got a free safety stepping down in the box. They're going to rotate that over to cover 3. Okay, so I'm going to have an opportunity to throw the underneath, right? Go rotate in cover 3. I got some underneath throws I can make there. You don't have time to think that. It's kind of just got to click in your head. And right now, due to the fact that the offense is putting him, or the play calling has put him in a bad situation, that's causing that to be all out of whack. His feet are out of whack. His eyes are out of whack. It just seems like he's a little bit discombobulated right now because of, the lack of execution in the play calling and the lack of assistance that he's getting. And then, there with the response a little bit later in the game to come back and make some really gutsy throws and, put his body on the line there at the end of the game just shows his heart and toughness. But yeah, man, this one was not fun at all. Damn it. Yeah, I feel that. BS. Rule started calling plays in the middle of the third quarter. He had a play sheet in his hand. Never seen that in Nebraska. I think the only time I remember, because remember, Frost used to call the plays. And then when Frost was getting beat down for calling the plays, I think that's when he handed the play sheet over to Whipple. And then I think that lasted a week, and that's how that went down. Um, I I think Rule's not dumb, right? Rule knows that there are a lot of issues in terms of what his offensive coordinator is doing. And of course, he's not going to go out there and throw him under the bus, but I'm really, really curious to see how this transpires as the year goes on. And if somehow he miraculously can keep his job this offseason. But at this point, I don't see how. Good catch, Begg. Saw that, but didn't notice it until you just said so. Yeah, I didn't really catch that either until you pointed that out. So great catch there. Harburg at QB the whole game, win by 14. I don't think that's the case. I like people calling for Harburg. Like, I understand because it's a frustration thing, right? Really, but like in the grand scheme of things, bowl eligibility is extremely important to us. But you kind of want your true freshman to battle through these moments and battle through these hardships and battle through these games, because that will only make him better in year 2 and year 3. And again, year 1 of Raiola and year 2 of Rule wasn't supposed to be the year that Nebraska wins it all or wins the Big Ten, right? It kind of turned into a conversation about backdoor playoff or Big Ten championship. But most of the offseason, people are like, get to bowl eligibility, get to 7 wins, get to 8 wins. And, that's still on the table, but something's got to get changed out. But I don't think that Harburg starting that game would have made too terribly much of a difference, only if it was for the running aspect of it. But again, I think UCLA did a really good job of making adjustments, and they really had a game plan to kind of confuse pre-snap. And, I think they would have just sold out to stop the run. And, Harburg still is one-dimensional at the end of the day, but he's gotten better. His mechanics are better. His throws are better. I will admit that. However, you got to understand that last drive of the game, too, UCLA's defenders are playing off a little bit, right? So there's a lot more open space to make some of those throws than Dylan had. So when we're talking about just him kind of marching down the field on that drive, that's another aspect to it you got to think about. But I mean, he came in and played pretty well, all things considered. But you still got to go with Raiola, in my opinion. What are the odds that Satterfield has a job after tomorrow? It's just not in Rule's nature to really do any midseason firings. I don't know if he has done that ever. And so, but also at the same time, he's had a lot of these guys with him for a long time. So I don't know if he's fired anybody, or too many people that are, within his tight circle of your Glenn Thomases and your Marcus Satterfields and those type of guys. But man, there's got to be some serious conversations going on behind the scenes, because Rule, at some point, Rule has to look out for himself, and Rule has to understand that, like, you're a reflection of my coaching staff, right? And so you're a direct reflection of me. When the outside world looks in on the Nebraska program, they're not sitting there thinking, oh, well, Satterfield's calling the wrong plays. No, they don't understand that. They're looking at Nebraska and Matt Rule and saying, what's wrong with Matt Rule? And at a certain point, I think Matt Rule has to understand that and just be able to flip that switch and be like, at the end of the day, I got to look out for me and the betterment of this team. And where that lands him, I think Rule is a really, really nice guy sometimes. And I hope he's not loyal to a fault like Scott Frost was, because that's what got Scott Frost into a lot of trouble. He was loyal to a fault. He stuck with his guys way too much. It was like Eric Chinander. Some of those guys just were almost forced, like Scott Frost's hand was forced to get rid of him. And as hesitant as he was, he got rid of him, but it was with the players, it was with the staff. He just held on too long to those close personal relationships he had at the detriment of himself and the program. What a great loss, right? Sack keeps his job. Does Thomas get a chance to game plan and call plays, please? And that brings me to that video I showed earlier, and or a few weeks ago, about him talking about how the offensive system and offensive game plan is a group effort, right? When that introductory press conference, when he first came on, and he's talking about how they've built the offenses before with him and Sat and all that, and that, Satterfield has been the guy that's kind of been calling the plays, but everybody has a say in the offensive execution and game plan and stuff like that. But I am wondering, at a certain point, does Rule toss that over to Glenn Thomas, or does he wait until Sat's gone? Does he just ride it out with Sat and just give an opportunity to do something? I don't know, because at this point, the best thing that Glenn can do is really kind of run, I guess, a similar offense, but right now there's so many execution issues that need to be coached up. And so a lot of these need to be hammered on so even the play calling can be effective when he comes in to step in. So it would kind of reminded me of the defense, whenever Shenander was out and I believe Bill Bush took over, and Bill Bush was talking about the defense, what they worked on in that week of preparation. He's like, we literally have to go back to the basics of being gap sound, right? And responsibilities in our gaps and just doing our jobs. They had to dumb it down all the way to the basics of that. And so this is one of those things where I don't know if necessarily, and bringing in, potentially Glenn Thomas to come in with Harburg at quarterback. I mean, Glenn Thomas probably does know Harburg pretty well, but Satterfield's run an offense with Harburg before. So there's a couple question marks there. I'm curious to see Raiola's back, but it didn't look good. That looks like one of those things that he was feeling. He was already worn down coming into this game. It's hard to look at him being ready to go by next game. So I'm glad we lost. They play crap. Rule needs to fire Satterfield. They need to wake the hell up. 100%. This is just becoming a joke at this point. Why do we stick with a QB who obviously struggling any other QB and we win this game? Raul hasn't played well since the first half of the Colorado game after these things. Again, I don't think too terribly much of this is on him. Again, you look at him early in the season. You talk about him early in the season. And one of the things he did very well early in the season was he was able to kind of make the reads pre-snap, post-snap. And he was also able to kind of just settle his base and make the throw. And right now, what you see a lot from Dylan Raiola is he's got choppy feet. And one of the things that Glenn Thomas, I've learned this from Glenn Thomas, that he says, calm feet equals calm mind, right? And so right now, Dylan Raiola's base is not set. And if you look at the feet of a quarterback, that'll typically tell you most of what you need to know. So if the feet are choppy, that means the mind is just overthinking, right? Because your feet are trying to keep up with your mind, and you're trying to put your hips in a position to where you can make a throw, but your eyes here. The eye discipline, it just needs to settle, right? And that's why when he was able to get a couple of those, throws going, it seemed like he kind of settled in and he was able to sit on those throws and be able to just kind of fire those throws in on the money. But anytime, and another thing that doesn't help is, think about this, 4th and goal from the 5-yard line. Which direction does Satterfield choose to move the pocket? Which direction does he move Dylan Raiola? Left, as a right-handed quarterback. You know what I'm saying? You have 2 routes going to the left, 1 route going up top, and you have a right-handed quarterback. It doesn't make sense to me. But a lot of this right now is just, UCLA, like they were mixing up their fronts a ton. Again, they did a bunch of rolling stuff downhill coverage wise. They were showing pressure, stepping out. That one where number 20 intercepted that ball. For one, Fedoni was open up the seam on that play. But 20 didn't even bait that too terribly much. I mean, he took 1 step in and almost kind of like stumbled on his way back, but he was able to get about 5 steps back and just pick that ball off pretty easily. Which, again, that is a throw that I think Dylan probably, he made a similar mistake in the Rutgers game, but that guy really sold that he was going to blitz. This one was more so he took 1 step forward, kind of backed out, and the throw was still there. Again, I just think I think he's gripping the ball a little hard because I think he's just afraid to let go of it, afraid to make a mistake. And then you have a tight window in a lot of these situations, right? So when let's say you are running against cover 2, you're running against cover 2 and you got some hole shots there to the outsides, right? Of those deep halves. You have about a split second window to get that throw over there. Get your eyes, get your hips, get that throw over there before the safety reads your eyes and gets over there. And I think a lot of what's happening too is he's a half beat late, because when you're thinking you're going to be a half step late, and by the time he realizes it, that window's closed, and then he's just trying to adjust and make something happen from there. So I do think a lot of it has to do with his confidence just being beat down. But a lot of this happened, when he started to really take some of this punishment. When we got into the Rutgers game, he started taking hits, and he's really starting to, it seems like, wear down and feel that. And his confidence seems to go down with it. But he shows flashes, a couple of those big throws that he can get into a rhythm when that happens. But I just don't think right now that, because I understand what everybody's saying. I just think right now, like, he's got to take these lumps and learn from them and get them on the film. But yeah, it's frustrating. I think we would have won that if Raul was healthy. Once we started running the ball, the pass and offense opened up. That was one of the biggest things. Is every time, first off, I'm still trying to figure out the running back rotation. That is still something to me that has no rhyme or reason right now as to how we are rotating these running backs. Ramir would come in and get a couple of shots, and I'll look at the distribution of carries here in a little bit. Ramir would come in and get a couple looks, run pretty well. Then we rotate Dowdle in, and Dowdle would get, a few good runs in, and then Emmett would come in. But it just seems to be random how we're using them. It doesn't seem to be, it's like at some point you would think like, okay, we want to get one of these guys rolling and just ride the hot hand. And I think they're rotating them out of rhythm almost sometimes. I think they're over-rotating their running backs, because you have change of pace backs and you have a big physical back that you can use in certain aspects. And I get not using them, the same. You don't want to use Ramir on every passing down, right? But get somebody in a rhythm and start letting them run downhill and just getting them rolling. It seems like the run game is setting up the pass game, and then the pass game never comes back to the run game, right? And then we just kind of run at random, and okay, it works. Let's try to run it again. There's no preemptive system going into this, or there's no preconceived notion of what we want this drive to look like. And I feel like that's why I feel like a lot of what Satterfield is doing is it's just random play calls. It's almost like he's throwing a dart at the play sheet half the time, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of rhyme or reason for a lot of these plays. Now, I will say there were a couple of instances where I wish Raiola would do a little bit more of a low to high instead of a high to low look, right? He does like to go high to low. And there was that play, I can't remember what it was, first half though, but it was a 2nd and 10 or 3rd and 10, and he's rolling right, and he has Dowdle, right on the underneath. And I don't think there was anybody within probably 6-7 yards of him on that underneath, but he wanted to try to make a tight window throw down the field. Ball got knocked away. Whereas if he kind of takes that just underneath the Dowdell, like you look at what, when I was watching Ohio State film, one of the things I noticed that Ohio State did well and that Will Howard did well was anytime the opportunity was given to take the underneath, he took it. He would use that, he would take it, and then he would let that kind of, bring them down, set everything up off of that. And that's what you got to utilize. When a team's in cover 3, you don't want to be throwing down the field. You want to take those underneaths, right? And you got to take those when the opportunity's there and get your yards and get up the field. And those are the rhythm throws, I think, because if you get a couple of those underneaths, and let's say Dowdle's able to get 15, 20 yards of that, okay, now we're moving, right? Defense is, the UCLA defense is running. Now we're getting them on their heels, right? And you'll throw another underneath, right? And then they're going to start thinking about their coverages a little more. They're going to be like, okay, they're using the underneaths a lot. Let's switch to cover 2, so we got some more flat defenders. And then all of a sudden, you can take advantage of that middle of the field. You can take advantage of those hole shots. There's no setup. There's no setup right now. Thomas sucks. Also, look how Raiola has regressed. I don't think Raiola has regressed in his talent. It's his confidence, and I just think he's getting beat up. I think he's getting beat up out there. Thomas is literally the guy that's developed him and Mahomes. Jeff Christensen is the one that works with him and Mahomes, not Glenn Thomas. But Glenn Thomas, I will tell you this, Glenn Thomas, if you look at his track record, Um, the man has done some great work with QBs. I believe he was the one. Yeah, I believe it was him that was with Matt Ryan in Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken, um, and had Matt Ryan. I think took Matt Ryan to two of his three Pro Bowls or two of his three highest completion percentage seasons. I can't remember. I did a deep dive on it a while back, but he's got a history of working well with quarterbacks. The thing is, like, there, the development happens on the field as well, and you can work all you want with a quarterback on mechanics, balance, and those things, but if what's happening on the field doesn't put them in a position to be able to make throws, and or there's just a lot of other circumstances that goes into it that quarterback coach doesn't have a say in, if that makes sense. But like I get y'all's point, right? Like, it's just like you would like to see him get better as the season goes along. Another thing that we have to take into account is Nebraska's early season slate was much easier than late season slate. And like I said, it's just kind of that body gets that wear and tear as the season goes along. He was healthy he said so many times, I'm just going to say this: a quarterback's never going to come out and be like, yeah, I'm hurt. Like, my shoulder's hurt. Like, because then what are they going to do? I'll be like, let's go after that shoulder, right? Or they're not going to come out and be like, my ankle's hurt. Those are the things you kind of want to keep close to the vest. Raul and Gifford burn up the field. Now, I did that video on the couple of deep touchdowns last week, and I feel like, Giff in those instances was really, that week against Ohio State, that was his worst coverage I think I've probably ever seen on tape from Gifford. It was horrid. I feel like he did a bit better today, but to your point, yeah, we do need a little bit more speed out there, especially with that that deep middle safety. We have Giff out there. And if we had Raiola at the end of the game. Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Dillon's looking more like Jackson Mahomes lately. The same thing with the play sheet happened at South Carolina when Satterfield was there as last season. The head coach started carrying a play sheet, and that's when they started doing well offense. I think I remember a South Carolina fan kind of talking about that when they were like, you shouldn't have hired him. Apparently, bowl eligibility isn't a big factor for this team. It needs to be. Harburg was thrown into a shitstorm. I'm a few series of settling. I don't know how good a gun we got. Yeah, that he was thrown into a very tough situation. Indiana looked crazy good again today. Started down a few, took off 47-10. Yeah, Indiana is a team that has some unreal confidence. And last week they said was the first time a team had no TFLs against them for like the first time since like 2013. I can't remember. It was some crazy. Like, they just have this unwavering confidence about them that, when they've led every point in this season. So when they got down, early, they weren't rattled by that because they know they could drop 40 or 50. That's the difference between them and Nebraska right now. Is I think Nebraska gets down and we really feel like, okay, how are we going to score? What are we going to do? Like, it's hard. It took us 8 times to score from inside the 10-yard line or inside the 5-yard line on some runs because our run creativity is 0. So yeah, so that Patterson, Signetti's no joke. I don't anticipate a drop off from Indiana next year. No, especially with Taven Jackson looking as good as he's looked. But I think Indiana was one of those teams that I feel like what Signetti had there, I feel like he had to kind of build the team that way where he brought a bunch of his James Madison coaches so he could hit the ground running, right? So he's got that same staff. And then, he went and got a bunch of guys who, again, weren't highly ranked in the portal, but they produced. They have a track record of producing at the college level. He brought like 14 guys from JMU that he coached over there and liked. And Indiana was one of those teams that they would have to come out and do something like this to get the attention of recruits. They would have, they need to come out and be a story. So exactly what he did there was exactly what Indiana needs. And it's going to help recruiting for them for sure. And the only thing I'm curious about there is Indiana really, they've been a basketball school for a long time, even though their basketball team's been down, but their NIL money has still been, of course, going to basketball. Now it gets interesting to see because, they're still a basketball school at the end of the day, but it'll be interesting to see how much NIL actually gets over to the football program to see how they can, kind of keep up with some of these teams. It's getting harder and harder to watch Nebraska football. That's hard. I mean, that's really hard to do considering I've said I'm done about 1,000 times over the last, even 2 seasons. If he stays, someone may snatch him up. Let's see. Well, there's a possibility too. Nebraska rushed for 223 yards against UTEP. Since then, they've averaged 105 yards per game on the ground. Yes. And it is a lot of the same exact running concepts. If you look at what Ohio State does well when they're running the ball, and again, Nebraska was able to shut this down because they did their fronts a little differently. Like I said, they went with some bear fronts and stuff like that. But what they do is they use motions a ton. And this 49ers style of offense that this team has talked about and the staff has talked about running, a 49er style of offense has motions, a ton of motions. You look at a Shanahan offense, tons of motions, right? This team doesn't motion very much at all. And that limits you because, you get some motions coming across. You can run, different blocking variations. You could run GT counters, bring a wide receiver across and block with him. You can vary up your run game. It seems like we're running a lot of inside zones, traps, but where's the, we're just not doing a lot of other stuff. The ISOs, we're not doing a ton of outside zones, stretch. We're not doing, whams, any of that. Like, it just seems to be like a laziness in terms of scheming up the run. And I think that's why you looked at that series on the line where, Nebraska had to run the ball 8 times to get in. And that's why you see 3 players unblocked on each play. It's just the run schemes aren't drawn up and executed well. And it's putting our guys on an island. And so our running backs are literally sitting there trying to dance around the line of scrimmage, trying to find a crease or trying to be able to get around some of these guys, but the blocking's not set up for them. I don't understand. Each and every single run has a certain blocking scheme to set it up. The counter has that, that little cutback lane to where you can go. You're going to you choose between 2 or 3 gaps, or you can bounce it out, right? Like there's options there. But what they're putting them in is they're funneling them to where they are just stuck in an alley of defenders and no blocking help is there. And, we saw Ramir dancing around a lot in there and getting some yardage. We saw Dowdell running through people. We saw Emmett trying to dance around, but these running backs are having to do a lot of it on their own just because these blocking schemes aren't set up very well. Did Dylan break a vertebrae? I hope not that serious. That's for sure. I think if he broke a vertebrae, I don't know if he would have tried to come back out there, but it looks like there's the muscle strain in your lower right back. I got in a car accident and the lower right side of my back got real bad, muscular damage and then internal damage as well. But like that lower back, just because everything from a quarterback position hinges from the hips, even more so with a quarterback, like that has to be there just because everything starts from the lower body up. And so anytime he goes to plant or drive or anything like that, he's not going to be able to just kind of let that ball throw and let it rip. And so naturally, if he's already thinking too much, like that's going to be a tough injury for him to battle through, just because it's so limiting. As soon as he starts to throw, that back is going to tighten up on him. It's going to pull on him. And then every time he gets hit, yeah.